This is Auteur Detour, wherein three film lovers travel through the filmographies of cinema's most important directors in hopes of finding a greater understanding on the other side.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Auteur Detour. This is Ian Hinckley here with Chris Plaza.
Hello again.
Came up from behind me.
And he disappeared when you turned around.
Travis White. That was
Hi.
it. And we're talking about, I'm just going to say it, my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, The Dark Knight. I mean, so far, that's why we're doing this, to sort of watch through them all and get them from a new perspective. But this one's my favorite. And I don't know. I mean, everybody's seen this movie, so we don't really need to get into the plot. But basically, he wasn't going to make another Batman movie after Batman Begins. And he got intrigued to do it after he decided to make a Joker movie. And then he also decided to make a Two-Face movie. And that's why this is sort of three movies all in one on top of each other. But it works. And I love it. And everybody showed up. It's like everybody's best work, in my opinion. What do you guys think?
Travis?
Yeah. I was just curious what was happening in Chris's screen. We were seeing some insane shaky cam footage. I love The Dark Knight. This was probably one of my most. I was a big Batman fan as a kid, as are a lot of kids. But this was one of my most anticipated films of all time because I really like Batman Begins, but I thought it had a lot of promise, and all the marketing for this movie was so insane. And Heath Ledger's Joker looked just so crazy, and it absolutely lived up to the hype. It's such an awesome movie. Every sequence is so incredibly kind of built up and plotted out, and by the end of the 2.5 hour runtime, it may be over plotted, it may be just so stuffed with stuff, but every action sequence and stuff, every moment of the movie is so carefully, precisionally honed that it's just it's like a machine. And especially those, every time the Joker shows up, it's such a thrilling kind of experience. Seeing it on the big screen, seeing it on the IMAX screen, one of the coolest, most memorable movie experiences for me of that kind of era. I loved it.
Man, I so wanted to be the contrarian here and be like, I watched it again, and you know what? It ain't all that. I've only seen it 1 billion times, and this time it's just not all that great. But you know what, man? This is one of those few movies that ever since it came out, and I saw it, of course, in the theater, just like most people probably, I kept coming back. And I would always find those Heath Ledger scenes, the opening scene with the mob, whether he's burning the cash with different stuff. I just kept coming back and finding those scenes, even if I didn't put the entire 2.5 hour long movie on. It's just one of those movies, and I couldn't put my finger on why. And obviously, the Joker is a tremendous part of that. I fucking love this movie so much. I was just so glad to get to see it from start to finish again. I argue, and I'll say more about this point later, I think when we get around to it, this is actually one of the most Christopher Nolan movies that he's made.
I agree.
And I'll say more about what I mean by that, I think, when we get to this topic about themes and what have you. But suffice it to say, this is a great movie.
Ian is right, though. It is a very long movie, and that I saw this. I came home after seeing Avatar in the theater, and then I was like, oh shit, I have to watch The Dark Knight right now. So I turned it on immediately afterwards, and it did suck me in, and it is so good and so compelling. But by the end of it, I was just and I think the ending kind of has some of the most, I don't want to say weakest parts, but the parts that hold the least weight. You know what I mean? They're the structurally the least sound parts of the movie. And I was just kind of all right,
Right. I also, I've seen this movie more than any other Christopher Nolan movie for sure. And I was definitely putting it on and being okay, I'm watching this as a perfunctory watch for this podcast and just to get themes and stuff. But I wasn't as invested as I was in Insomnia because I hadn't seen that since 2003 or whatever. Let's talk about it a little bit then, because I do agree. It's his ultimate sort of statement in a lot of ways to me, about what we talk about becoming the man that you want to be, like forcing that upon yourself and upon everybody else. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
let's talk about the beginning. Like it opens up. Well, there's like 3 opening scenes. Like 3 cool parts of the beginning, which are the title over that score of just that. I don't know if that's like, you know, Ian, you're the musician, but like that like string kind of sound that's like the like vague bat shape through the blue flames, like one of the coolest openings ever. Like Tim Burton kind of like Tim Burton kind of like you know, was the pioneer of cool, like weird Batman openings, you know, in his day. But this makes it kind of like more artsy and more just kind of like just stunning. And I don't know, that it kind of like took my breath away this time watching it. I'm like, how did he get away with that?
Well, and fully engrossing too. Talk about the opening, because you know I saw it in the theater like you guys. Then I wanted to see it again, and I got the highest resolution quality I could later when I watched it at home. You know, and it opens with that shot of basically it's like a helicopter shot or something of the building,
a real city,
a real city, but it's in the highest detail you can imagine. Every single thing is completely visible, and you're thrown right into the middle of it in a slow pull in as it zooms into those windows. Like everything is really, really clearly visible. Like the whole world is created for you, like right off the bat.
I'm trying to remember what movie. Like, so they played that prologue at the start of a different movie, and I remember going to see whatever movie that was.
I know what you're talking about. What the hell was that?
It doesn't matter.
Was it a comedy or something? I think.
No, it was like I'm watching like 40-Year-Old Virgin in IMAX, so I can see the opening. No, but it was so it was. I mean, just so that really sets the stage. It's like this like kind of heat-like city, right? This like cool blue light, but it's like a real city. You see the scale of it, and that kind of there's something so. You know, this was the era of like, again, like the Matrix and like Michael Bay and like crazy cameras zooming around with like computer effects. Like even I'll lump Peter Jackson in there too as being part of this movement of like just super choreographed, computer assisted camera movements, which are really cool and really can be, you know, really amazing in a lot of ways. This one is like the opposite. It's like, look, this is a real camera. There's no digital effects. We're going to go from here to here. And that movement through space, it's like, I mean, it's like bringing filmmaking back to like its essential elements in a way, right? And that's what was so radical about Christopher Nolan's aesthetic and this movie in particular. It's like, we're going to impress you by just going from here to here and timing the explosion so you know it wasn't faked. And we had to set that up. And what do you think about that?
Yeah,
you know, I mean, this wasn't guys in a computer lab. This is real life, and that is like makes all the difference in this movie.
We are,
and he does that
2
over
years
and over.
After Children of Men, you know, which is playing in that same sort of thing. And Alfonso Cuarón made this movie. It's like the same year as Gravity. It's right in there too. Like he's playing in that sort of world too. Obviously, Gravity's not reality, you know, but it's that thing of like, let's fucking ground ourselves here. Like it's, you know, it's very grounded, like you said. And this one especially because unlike any other Christopher Nolan movies, it's completely propelled forward. Like there's no time jumps going back and forth in time. It's just like constantly like starts here and fucking ends here, and there's nothing in between. And it's the only one of his movies that does that, as far as I think. And
and that creates this. And it creates this frantic kind of momentum because you're in order to do that, what he does is utilizes cross-cutting in a like a really haphazard, or like not haphazard, but just a way that feels kind of like chaotic. And specifically when the Joker shows up and you start cutting to these different things happening, and it's just so out of control, and it just like you kind of like have to hold on to the sides of your chair to like to keep your composure.
I mean, it makes really the action. The thing that I really loved about it this watch, and you know, I talked to you guys in real life about this, but like I watched Terminator 2 this week because I was watching this, and then I was like, God, this is a good fucking action movie. And I was just like, I just love good action movies. Like, and the action in this movie
no, you don't.
Is incredible.
You don't like Avatar. You don't like good action movies. I'm just saying that right now. But yeah, no, this is a great action movie, and it is like clunky in a way. And it's like you know, I've been watching a lot of old martial arts movies, you know, and I I love the kind of the swiftness and of the movements and the kind of elegance, and this movie doesn't have that. And in fact, some of the Batman fights are like the weakest parts of the movie. Like he doesn't do it that much like fist fighting in the movie, which is probably good. Because the choreography of those scenes is like not always like 100% convincing. You kind of have to suspend disbelief a little bit. But
the action
the action in general, based on the editing and the movement in space, is like, especially with vehicles and stuff, is so compelling and so thrilling. When you watch the helicopter crash, you, like I've referenced several times, when you watch the truck flip over, it's chase real cool, and the models blowing up and stuff like that. The model Batmobile, like it's
the chases
really
through the kind of underground area too. The ride, like almost under, what's it called when he's on the bat bike or whatever, like it just follows. It's just really, really well done. And that's what I was thinking too. And I'm watching this going, this is where he's really getting solid at choreographing action, because I remember watching some of his other ones where there's not a lot of physicality, if you will, in some of his other films. And he kind of starts that off with Batman Begins, obviously, it being a comic book movie. There's got to be fights and whatnot, but he really ramps it up, and it's just much more engaging in this way. It just feels a lot more fluid. It even starts off with one of the more compelling action sequences.
Well, that's what I was going to say. To me, it's not the fist fight action that's in this movie that's impressive. It's literally just cutting from one clown saying one thing really quick to another one that keeps you like on the fucking edge of your seat in a weird way. It's
when the clown gets jolted back by getting electrocuted from the safe, or shocked from the safe, and then it just cuts away from him. That is like one of the craziest moments in the movie, because you're like, what is going on? And that's exactly the kind of essence of the action.
If we were better podcasters, we would know those clowns' names, because they all do have names. They do. And like
Bozo.
It is one of them's Bozo.
Wait, they don't say the names in the movie though. They don't say the names in the movie.
I know. They don't. I know.
So that's not the text. That is not the text.
I was reading like facts about this movie, and it was saying like
supplemental facts. That's not
which clowns got killed in which way, and they all have names Jingles and Jangles and shit.
Anyway. I think the whole point is to not really be able to distinguish which one's which, because we're not supposed to expect the Joker being among them. So if we like sort of put an identity behind each clown, then that kind of lessens the impact of the revelation that the Joker is one of the guys. Yeah, I don't know.
The reveal of the Joker is so good, and it's almost like when he takes the mask off, he like becomes the Joker, right? In pulling off that heist and stuff like that. It's such a cool moment. And his hair, I don't know if you noticed, you can't tell his hair is green until one of the last shots. It's like it's only in that moment. So it's like he wasn't the Joker, and then he is the Joker. It's really cool. So the other scene at the very beginning of the movie is when Batman is taking out a bunch of people. And that's another confusing scene, because you see a bunch of guys who they're dressed like Batman attacking like the mafia guys, and the Scarecrow, who's now like a drug dealer of just
I just love
chemicals that make you insane.
I love
that's a cool detail. That's a cool world building detail for sure. But what I love is, so Batman, the first time you see him, he reaches his hand out, bends the gun barrel. What do you call it? The barrel of the gun of somebody, and then punches him, and you're like, oh, he has this cool device where he can like take out guys like super hard with this like metal thing, bend a gun, rip open a car, but then it's not enough. The car gets away, and then he's like, okay, this thing is clunky and doesn't really work. But then you see what kind of defines him as Batman. He says it's because he doesn't wear hockey pads, but the real thing that defines him is he gets up on the edge of the thing and just stands there in like full glory, and then just decides to jump down like several stories on top of a car. And it's that will to power, right? That is like the actual thing that defines him as Batman. And that's such a cool moment, that he's like, he can do all this gadgetry and stuff like that, but that's kind of supplemental to just him as a person, like as a great man, accomplishing these things. I think it's such a cool, like, again, character moment. Just like, here's what you need to know about this guy.
Absolutely.
Like, you don't need to go back and like talk about what happened in the last movie. You just go, here's Batman, you know who he is, but like, this is how intense he is.
And that may be why I really love this movie so much more, because it gets straight to the world building, and less. Every Batman movie you see is almost some mild rehash of his origin story, even if it's very brief. I love that. Like, we just skip that completely. You know who this guy is. Now let's get back to what's happened since we saw him last, which is he's had a crazy impact on Gotham, the crime level, and now he's spawned all of these copycats that are, you know, using guns and actually trying to like do things that he's not.
Can we take a moment to appreciate Christian Bale? Because I feel like
he gets
in the first movie, he gives such a great central performance, and in this one, he's really almost on the sidelines. And I think he's giving like an Al Pacino in Godfather level performance in like subtlety and kind of restraint. And he's such a perfect foil for the Joker. I don't know. I love him. I love him in this movie.
I love him too. I mean, he's able to sit back, and that's like I mean, just the fact that like this is Christian Bale's biggest movie, right? I mean, there can't be a bigger one. And he is like, he's not, I mean, besides adding a little fucking zest to his voice, which we all can make fun of till the day we die. But aside from that, he fucking takes a back seat in a way that's like so giving to the movie and in a way that elevates the movie so much. And like, that's a fucking actor. Like he knows exactly what to give in every scene that he's in. The scene when he's just behind Harvey Dent and Jim Gordon as they're sort of arguing, and the camera's sort of panning around them, like, and he's just sitting there sort of watching them, and he's in the bat seat, so it's hard to even call him like acting in that moment, but his physical acting in that moment, even when he finally steps in, is just like, I just loved him in this movie. Like it really fucking, I give it to him.
Yeah. Actually one of my only points that were docked for this movie, especially when I looked at Batman Begins, was the bat voice being ramped up to an absurd degree. It feels like this time, like he goes from the first one to "It's not what I do that defines me" to "The live long enough to see yourself," you know.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, I wonder how much of that is like Christopher Nolan pushing, like, let's make it so no one can hear what he's saying, so they have to like I know he loves not letting people hear what anyone's saying. Like maybe that was his decision, but you know, I don't know that it's the voice that bothers me as much as the fact that Batman can't breathe out of his nose.
Yeah,
and that like really inhibits the way he talks. Like at multiple times, you're like, are you? Several times he's giving his lines, he's like, "You're the one who's supposed to be the best one of us," and it's like, are you okay, man? Like, you know, like. He just fought like 10 guys, and now he's like, he needs to breathe. He like cut some air, just give him some air holes.
Well, I heard that actually
bats have huge nostrils. Like integrate that into the costume.
Talk to Lucius.
I read somewhere where the suit he was wearing in this movie in particular was incredibly uncomfortable, such that it made him like angry to be wearing it. So that partly like fueled some of the like more intense vocal inflections. I don't know how true that is, but I don't know.
I have a feeling that it was sort of all of the above. Like it was Christopher Nolan sort of giving him sort of that direction to make him more of a presence in the movie potentially also. And also to, like you said, he does love to fuck with the audio, you know? And then I also think that the part of it that I guess we haven't said yet, but that Heath Ledger brought a character that, I mean, truly one of the best characters of all time, like in any movie ever. And he lives in that character. And I think when you're an actor acting against that kind of thing, you kind of have to like choose a little more specifically what you're doing, you know? And I think that might be potentially what he did, is just like his stakes were raised.
But they barely act together. I mean, Joker is like not even in this movie that much, which was crazy to me. Like coming back to it after I used to watch this movie a lot too, and all the Batman movies that Christopher Nolan did. And like, you know, I was like an hour and a half into the movie, and I was like, the Joker's barely been in this thing. He's only had a few lines. Like it's kind of crazy how he just kind of comes in and just leaves this crazy impression.
This movie that we haven't really mentioned is Harvey Dent, the Two-Face storyline, because
there's two figures. There's the Harvey Dent figure, and there's also Rachel, who's now played by another actress who I like in this role, I think even less than Katie Holmes. And you know, I know she's super talented. She's like a director now too, and I just don't find her like compelling in this role. And
I can't judge Maggie Gyllenhaal on that because it's Christopher Nolan does not fucking write.
He doesn't set up.
Right.
Yeah, I was
right.
gonna say that's a great point. It's hard. He doesn't create any memorable female characters, really. Maybe outside of Hilary Swank's portrayal in Insomnia.
There's
maybe?
a couple throughout, but not a lot. And this
But I
one,
will say I agree with you that like at least Katie Holmes is the most broad. Sorry, the most. Don't shake your head at me. Okay, I'm gonna cut that. No, she's the most like broad stroke.
Leave it in.
Of a character, and like Maggie Gyllenhaal tries to bring something that doesn't always work. Sort of, she just doesn't always fit the tone of the movie.
I just think she's poor. I don't think she does even a bad job of acting or what she like. It's just she's miscast, I think, and. I don't like, she was in that movie
Katie Holmes
around this time.
She's the one who chose not to come back too, which I thought was kind of interesting. Okay. He wanted her to come back, but
interesting.
She at least I will say like she's a more believable partner for Bruce Wayne and Aaron Eckhart than Katie Holmes was to me. Like she just seems of a different sort of age. I don't know why, but I don't know how different they are in age. But
yeah,
Katie Holmes does. She seems young and sort of just like.
I know different. What you mean. I know what you mean. Like, yeah, she's like, she's in Dawson's Creek.
Yeah.
In our mental image of her, but yeah, I just the whole idea of the Rachel character being this new central element to the Batman mythos just doesn't fully work for me, and I like different elements of the way it works out in this story, of course. But it just kind of always makes me feel weird. And I also feel a little bit weird about the Harvey Dent storyline. Like that doesn't fully work for me either. Just towards the end of the movie.
Yeah. Well,
his kind of descent into madness isn't fully believable to me, especially because he's just like growling at the end. He's just like, I'm really mad. And it's just now you're a murderous like psycho. Like, I don't know.
I actually watched it a little bit closer with respect to that, and I feel this time that he actually kind of implies more of a duality earlier on. Like he actually is kind of faking it a little bit the way he is, and so it led me to feel okay. They actually did a better job because I agreed with you initially, Travis. I'm like, all of a sudden he's just another guy, but again, I really watched it a little bit closer this time to see like, does he actually have these elements of like discord in his personality already, and we're just not seeing it? Is he already just this perfect person, and then all of a sudden he flips on literally flips his the coin, to a different character? I actually think they did a better job this time than I originally gave him credit for. Like in the beginning, well, I mean, if he's overly. He's trying too hard. Like in one of the early scenes, he's how can you do this? He starts growling a little bit early. Like he's not fully in control. He wants to appear like he's this guy, the white knight that's got it all, got all the answers. But I think in the background, he's trying to prove something to overcome something. Like, why are you trying to prove this thing? And of course, he's got this damaged background and, his IA and everyone kind of making fun of him. I was kind of looking for that, and maybe it's less of a point because it's such a dense movie with so many characters to it. But I don't know. It's a weaker part of the movie, but it's not as completely like he just flips a switch like I thought it was.
That was one of the big criticisms of the movie, was that people, or for comic book fans especially, were saying like, how can you introduce Two-Face that late into the movie and then end that storyline? And it does feel rushed. Like it does feel like you're 2 hours into this movie and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, now like it feels like it's setting you up for part 3 when it starts to happen,
I think people want to embrace a villain as like a central villain and really be with that person, but really the character of Harvey Dent is what drives the movie rather than the transformation into Two-Face. And so I think we expect a certain amount of exposure to an iconic villain like Two-Face, and that subverting that expectation is going to naturally come with some pushback. I didn't have a problem with it.
I had no problem with the amount of Two-Face we get. I just don't buy his descent to madness. It just doesn't work. And I think they do set it up like, again, like in Christopher Nolan style, like mathematically, like this part goes here and this means this. And at the end, I'm just like, okay, but like I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it performance wise, and I don't buy it writing wise.
But I just think that it's a timing issue. Like I think that it's not about
performance
when he goes on his killing spree. I just mean he doesn't have time to give the performance he needs to give. You know what I mean? Like when he goes on his killing spree, that he kills what 4 or 5 people or something in 15 minutes of the movie. And it's like until this movie, I was like, oh, he did kill people. Like I didn't even think of him as a murderer. You know what I mean? Like because it just happened so quick where suddenly, like you said, I agree with you. Like all of a sudden, he's a completely different character because the Joker won, right? The Joker wins in this movie. And the only reason why Batman, I mean, I want to get into it more because I do think this ties into why I think this is the ultimate version of Nolan doing his create a man sort of story that he loves to tell, is because he is creating this myth of the Harvey Dent thing. And like it's the real story of this movie, like you said, Chris, is the Harvey Dent story. It's the Joker and Batman fighting for like the soul of Harvey Dent, basically.
Okay,
like,
so this is part of what I have a problem with too, because Batman at the end goes like, "You were the best guy, Harvey Dent." I'm going to do a cartoon walrus voice. "You were the best guy, Harvey Dent. We're so sad you went crazy." Like, why was he so great? Like, I also don't feel like they did a perfect job setting that up either. Like, you know what I mean? Like why was he so like they gesture towards it, but you don't really feel like I don't know. They kind of they brush over that.
I think in Batman's.
Nope.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say the fact that he can convict over 500 people in one single instance and get that many people off the street where Batman is literally one at a timing it, I think is sort of like he eliminated the majority of the criminal presence in Gotham in one single case. And I think that idea is what kind of drives this notion of Harvey as a much more effective.
And also, I think
Batman.
I think it's that. And then I think for Batman or for Bruce Wayne or whatever, like the whole, especially in the next installment of this series, like he wants to create a world where you can do it without the mask, right? And that's what Harvey Dent is like in his.
And that's where
like, I understand what they're trying to say. I just don't think it works. And I really feel like this movie works on a mythic level, and it's of Batman versus the Joker. I really feel like that, just that battle between them, like whatever, in like kind of philosophical terms, works really well. And I think when they try to like apply it to like this third element of like the good soul that's corrupted, it doesn't. That part of it is the weakest part. It doesn't really hold up. And I think they try to. At the end of the movie say like, oh, and doesn't that feel like this didn't work and blah, blah, and you're like, no, I don't feel like that. Like I feel like you had something good and then that end part just does not work. That's and I still love the movie.
I'm with you. And I also love the movie, and that ending is the least successful.
I'm going to complain a lot more about this. We're going to keep going, but
yeah, we are. And especially about one of the big themes in this movie. I was just going to say, like, the end is the worst part, not necessarily for any performance or anything other reason in my mind. It's just
Aaron Eckhart though.
No, he's good.
Go ahead.
Could have been Guy Pearce, but
it should have been Guy Pearce. It absolutely should have been Guy Pearce.
I would have loved Guy Pearce.
It should have been somebody a little nerdier, and it should have been with a little bit of like a crazier,
kind confidential Guy Pearce.
Yeah,
like Aaron Eckhart's just too normal seeming. He's just too. Even when he yells, it's just like, come on. He looks like he's just like an angry guy in a soap opera.
But
like, it doesn't.
Part of that to me is that you are tired of the movie, and not like because you don't love it, but because it's so propulsive and long that by the time it gets to him flipping, and I think that if we cut out the worst sequence in the movie, the ferry sequence, completely.
I like the ferry sequence.
Well, that's good, but I think that
the ferry sequence.
I don't think it's like bad. I just think it's hat on a hat. Like we've already got the point of their philosophical.
No, it's not. But that's the very moment where we're proven that Batman is proven correct. I think in a way,
but he's not.
Like, you have to have
that. The ferry sequence demonstrates one of Nolan's key themes, though, which is that democracy is bad.
Exactly. I don't
People
want
should
it.
not be allowed to vote.
I don't like
A
that.
level-headed
That's why I
captain should
don't-
be able to make the rules.
I think what I meant about that is like the soul of Gotham is leaning toward Batman.
Right. As long as a level-headed older guy with a beard is in charge who can take control away from people's votes and say this is the right thing to do,
or
no matter what. Or a giant guy with a lazy eyeball.
Yeah.
Like one of those people has to take control no matter. Yeah.
So that's why I think it's the weakest sequence also. But I also think that it's just glut. Like we've already got Chris, you're saying that's the moment, but the truth is that the Joker does win. Like Harvey Dent turns bad. Like, and the only reason why Batman wins the movie is because he lies and says, no, Harvey Dent didn't turn bad. Like he just pretends like everything that happened didn't happen so that he can win, right? He lies to make like the public like him, you know? And that's not what that fairy sequence is telling us. Like all that fairy sequence is doing is another version of an impossible moral quandary that the Joker puts you in, which is a good sequence, but it's just in a 2-hour and 40-minute
no,
long
it's
movie.
good.
No, we're never given prior to that a chance for the actual citizens of Gotham to demonstrate the fact that they are fundamentally good. Otherwise, we're just being told through proxy.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. And I really like seeing them when they're trying to kill Kyle Reese or whatever. I like those parts, but I really like seeing them on the ferry all like bickering and like whatever. I really like that sequence. And I like all the weird characters you meet, like I don't know.
Here's my thing. I think if that's the finale of the movie, then great. And then but if you're gonna go from that to now we're watching a movie about Harvey Dent turning bad and the Joker, that's when you get tired. That's when you're like, oh, I thought the movie was over. Like
I have another fix. I have a different fix. Make it longer. And give Harvey Dent like more time to go crazy. Like it's not even 3 hours long. Make it 3 hours long. Give Harvey Dent. Here's what I think would fix it. Different actor playing Harvey Dent. Different makeup for Harvey Dent. They do this thing where they like strip his skeleton down, and at the time it looked really cool because no one had ever seen a guy with a face ripped off before. And I agree, like it's an amazing effect in and of itself. As a guy who just got burned and he's just like talking normally, like and I read somewhere that was like a deliberate thing that Christopher Nolan was like, don't do a weird voice, don't do this and this. Too, yeah. It's like we want to make it like as kind of like you just buy into it, and maybe he's right in some way. I remember the movie Let the Right One In came out around this time, and there was a guy who got half his face burned somehow or something like that, and it was all swollen and mangled, and it was just a simple practical effect, and it was so much more believable and effective than this was. Right. And this just looked kind of like, it looks like monster makeup or something like that, and in like the worst way, but in like a digital way. And again, it's impressive because it's, what's the word, it's reductive, it's what's the word, you're taking away rather than adding. Yeah, it's like there's something very impressive about that, but it's not, watching it for the millionth time, watching it like 15 years on or whatever, it's just not as effective as it should be. And I think, and I really feel like you want to feel his pain, and I don't think you do. I think you feel this kind of vague anger, and I don't think it works.
I totally agree, especially when I think about, like, if you have a burn victim and your eyeball is fully exposed, you need to cover that up. Like, that's not going to be a
But he's refusing, right? That's the whole thing.
Other stuff, your eye's going to completely dry. I mean, you're right. I think if he puffed up his face, so there's like this swelling where he's hideous and horribly, like, because it's not real. That's not the way your face would actually end up holding.
And if your pupil is like, what if his pupil's like white and you just can't see out of it? That would be cool too. And then you could like kind of walk into walls as he's walking, and then you're like, oh yeah, that guy got hella burned like 5 hours ago. That makes sense. Make it believable. That's I feel like, I don't know. It's not a total
jolting,
failure
though. Like it's jolts you when you see it. Like it is so strange that you're like, oh, it kind of is a thing.
And he also has like this like kind of like blackened kind of like pan-seared tuna look like on a few parts that looks like it looks like gravel's in there or something. It's just kind of stupid.
Well, especially when they went a certain visual route with the Joker that went different from what we are used to in pop culture, with like a makeup smile. He actually has scars and stuff. It looks kind of crazy. Why not have a different looking Two-Face with like you said, make a different looking Two-Face who's clearly visibly half monster, basically, but in a different way than we're used to some comic book portrayal of it.
Yeah, I think it's just not as like Heath Ledger is so believably like insane in this movie and so scary. Like he goes from like being like goofy and just like a weird crazy person to like being really frightening when he like yells and stuff like that. Aaron Eckhart just cannot live up to it. I'm not saying he's a bad actor. Okay. I'm just saying maybe miscast in this role. I really feel strongly about
that being the final word on it, and I'm not going to argue anymore because I need to stop talking about him because who cares? The fucking Joker is the guy in this movie. We need to like really get into the real heart of the movie, which is fucking, like you said, this philosophical battle between the Joker and Batman, right? I mean,
yes.
And especially the real heart of the movie, which is this performance and this character that like live beyond the movie. Like it's so iconic in the,
you can't, the listeners can't see this, but I'm showing my numerous Joker tattoos right now. And of course there's a little Leto, there's a little Mark Hamill, but the chest tattoo, of course, is Heath saying one of the classic lines, "Why so serious?" That's another thing this movie has, like these iconic lines that are like, "Why so serious? You either die a hero or live to see yourself become a villain. Have a nice trip. See you next fall." which is from this movie. So that's where that expression comes from. The Dark Knight, 2008, and it's entered the lexicon of the public. Just had to throw that in there. Heath Ledger is really good at this movie. That's all.
I was wondering, like,
that's all you have to say. He's fucking really good at this movie. We have to talk about it.
One thing too about the Joker in this particular movie is prior incarnations were like smiling Jokers, right? He's actually not. He's either usually like a straight face or kind of scowling, but it's the juxtaposition of that scarred smile on his face with the like kind of looking down and the sunken eyes and the he's really not smiling much at all. In fact, we're introduced to him with a fake laugh, like he's not really laughing, like for mad, so that just sort of menacing vibe about him, because the Joker is always kind of like this fun sort of evil character, and he's not fun. He's very much like an intimidating, very serious person. And that really brings a lot to the role that we haven't seen.
But I do
before.
love when he's having fun, like when the his henchman grabs the mask and then shocks him to death. And he's like does a little shake, and it's like that's a brilliant, like unfun fun.
Heath Ledger is one of the best actors of his generation. Should have got the Oscar for Brokeback Mountain. Gives an insanely like physical, amazing performance in this movie. I mean, it really is like something to behold. It really is like, it's so sad that he died after this movie.
It's so sad. I mean, it's also like the thing that I forgot until I was sort of reading about this movie was I remembered the pushback against Heath Ledger when he got cast. I forgot how much of that was just homophobic, people being like, Brokeback Gotham or whatever, bullshit. Like,
I think more of it had to do with his history as like a pop, like teen idol kind of thing, with like 10 things I hate about you, and he's like a kind of nice looking guy.
But there were so many jokes of just like Brokeback, just the word Brokeback was a punchline. Like in 2008 when this came out, like it was really like a thing. I mean, that movie is amazing, and it. But anyway, that's aside. And he's great in it. You're right, Travis. He should have gotten.
He's so good. He's so good, and I love Philip Seymour Hoffman. He should have had about 10 other Oscars that he didn't get. Number one for Boogie Nights, best supporting actor. Boogie Nights.
His least, like my least favorite.
Capote is a bad movie, and I really hate that he won the Oscar for that movie. Like, I'm not saying he did a bad job, but like, it's just such a weak film. Anyway, sorry.
But I think certain nuances that Ledger brings to that role are just so interesting. Like some of it may have even been accidental because he's got prosthetics on his mouth, right? Which, as I understand it, kind of slowly kind of kept peeling off a little bit because he insisted on being in character like all the time. So I think some of the licking of his lips might have actually been to like seal the like the prosthetics. I read something about that, but it makes it great because he has this lizard-like quality.
Yeah, maybe it
like,
started that way. Yeah, like it definitely like it's such a cool little tick. Yeah.
Yeah,
you know?
and it feels like a guy who's got like if you have scars on your mouth, you're gonna lick them. You know, like that's
yeah.
it feels like
right.
that to me. It's just like
It's a weird bad habit, and I love how like kind of disgusting he is, and he's trying to be like rub it in your face, like he is very like kind of punky, right? Like I read something like that they were trying to go for like his look being a little bit like who's the great designer who just died, Vivian Westwood, right? Like bring a little of that kind of like energy to it, and it was like, well, that's a little pretentious, but I think that is what it is, right? The greasy hair and like licking his lips and being like you know, putting his face in people's face and just being gross. Like I think it does work on that level, actually.
It also,
especially in the scene where he's like, hello beautiful, and they're like when he's, you know, trying to get Harvey Dent when he kind of parts his hair with the knife or whatever. I'm like, this is gross. He licks his lips. And perfect.
In the interrogation scene, when it's so bright and his makeup is coming off so much, because he's getting his ass kicked, you know, that's when like he really looks greasy, you know, because it's like, and that scene, you know, we talked about, maybe we haven't even talked about it on the podcast, but like the heat inspiration for this movie is so big. And that scene especially, I mean, obviously there's the opening scene, but then like there's the scene that's almost parallel to the diner scene in Heat, which is the interrogation scene where they're talking about like, I'm you, you're me, you know, like that kind of thing. And like, I love it. I mean, that scene works so well because it not only works from like a storytelling point, but also putting them both under these bright lights. You're looking at a dude dressed as a bat with fucking clear, like that's the only time you can see very clearly. He's got fucking black makeup around his eyes, right? And then you see like the Joker whose like makeup is off and he's, you know, you see like that suit stinks. Like you can smell it, you know, you're like, this guy smells bad. And you're just like seeing how cartoonish this is, these two fucking ideas fighting against each other.
Yeah.
I love that scene.
That was, I think, Christopher Nolan's favorite scene in the movie too. My favorite shot in the movie is when Joker is like hanging out of that car window.
Oh,
that shot is so sick. That shot is so sick.
He refers to it like himself, like I'm just like a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do if I caught one. And he looks like a dog that's like hanging his head out the window, you know?
It's so good. It's so like unsettling and like cool. Like it's just chaos.
And there's no music. It's just kind of the silence you get to be with that moment.
So good. Awesome. Yeah, the music is also amazing. And that like kind of like guitar riff that happens every time he shows up, right? It's like, and then it's you know, I do remember Christopher Nolan saying, I read nothing about the movie in preparation for this. I literally remember poring over the entire internet to read every quote I could when it came out. Sure. Like I was so obsessed with this movie. But Christopher Nolan talking about wanting the Joker's appearances in the films to be like when the shark shows up in Jaws and to cause the same kind of really like good. Chaotic ripples through the story. Because you're just, I mean, and that's how it feels like you're just going straight forward. And then all of a sudden you're cross cutting and you're showing all these things happening. You're like, wait, what? And you're totally thrown off balance. And you have to kind of, through Batman's actions or whatever, like kind of like regain your composure. The best moment of that is when Batman, for no apparent reason, puts Dent in a headlock and chokes him out, like right in front of what's her name, Maggie. Rachel, and it's such a good moment because he talks in the Batman voice in that moment, right? Like he's already in character, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "They've come for him." And watching Christian Bale in the suit talk in that voice is another like kind of like weird moment that's like super powerful. And it's like, why is that such a cool moment that we've never seen in a Batman movie? I love that moment too. Back to Joker and Batman, sorry if I may. I do want to talk about one thing, which is when this movie came out, there's a lot of imagery that was people said was kind of like, called to mind like 9/11 and like the character of the Joker doing these kind of like sort of terrorist plots to kind of like create so chaos, so kind of like disharmony or whatever. And Alfred's description of him as like, some men just want
to watch the world burn, right?
Okay, so I just want to be on record as like, that is not how the world works.
No, it's not.
Like there aren't people like this is like there's a phrase you hear sometimes online when people kind of make these assertions like about politics and stuff like that. Well, it's like, well, these people are just like this, and that's why politics happens this way. And the response is like, this is what zero material analysis does to a motherfucker. Because it's like, the reason that terrorists like are, in our popular imagination come from the Middle East, that they want to attack America. These are not just because they hate our freedom. This is not just because they like hate the world order that exists under America. There are like material reasons that these things happen. And the fact that the movie kind of asserts like, oh, he's just making up his origin. It doesn't even matter what set him off. It's just that there's always these crazy people that are trying to like, destroy this beautiful American hegemony. And it's that's not the real, that's like a perfect encapsulation of how America views terrorism. Because it's like, no one knows why it happened. But they're in the Middle East, there's like a bunch of crazy guys, and you got to deal with them. And it's really hard. And it's like, and you have to shut them down. And sometimes you have to you have to go above the law, beyond the law. You have to set up these really immoral, unethical systems. But it's just for that. And then you'll never do it again. Like, it's such a, I'm not saying that this is Christopher Nolan's view, or that he's saying this is good, or that Batman represents, the George W. Bush White House or American foreign policy in general. But it does perfectly encapsulate this world, like the American worldview, and tries to make sense of it. And I just want to say, it does not succeed as a political statement, but it does succeed if you think of it as Batman being a figure of self-actualization and like trying to be in control of your life, and then this other part of you that is chaotic and that just is basing its actions on like impulse rather than rationality. It's the id rather than the ego, right? And I think in that way it is really like a successful kind of like myth about two halves of like one person. So if you think of this as like the internal struggle, I think it works on that level. Like in the first movie, there's all this talk that Liam Neeson does about like, you're not scared of, these outside forces. What you fear is actually inside of you. And you feel like, and that is, I think, a Christopher Nolan theme that we've talked about a little bit, how he, loves rationality, but there is this part of his artwork that is all about the irrational and and how you lie to yourself to kind of tamp that down, and like the scary parts of yourself. I think that's a powerful element of his work that's not really appreciated enough. And I think in this movie, that's what the Joker is.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think?
I think that's a very spot on reading. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. But I will say that to me, a big theme in his movies, like back to Following and Memento and like throughout, is, how far are you willing to go to do the right thing? That's sort of where this movie ends, right? Is him sort of, I'm going to fucking push like to the brink of, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, it's inappropriate, the shit that he does, right? He's hacking the whole fucking grid so that he can spy on everybody. Then he's lying about Harvey Dent so that he can like propel, this myth forward. It's like, how far are you willing to go to sort of create this person that you want to be? And in this movie, he's presented with this sort of Joker argument that like, there's this line that you've created doesn't actually exist. Like, there's no right or wrong. There's just absurd chaos. Like, anybody can choose any given thing in any given moment based on what they feel, like, it's like, I'm just a dog chasing a car, like you said, like, and so this idea that Batman is still sort of trying to perpetuate this myth of like, right, in the end, you're right. Like, he's creating this and he's like, I'm sticking with this thing. But much like in The Prestige, my problem at the end of that movie, where it's just like, you've presented a series of arguments against what your final outcome is.
Well, I don't think Christopher Nolan is saying that this is right. I mean, just like in Memento, clearly, he's saying he's lying to himself to keep his sanity in this outrageous situation. I don't think that it's as simple as like, I don't think it's as black and white that he's like, I think of him as a conservative filmmaker in a lot of ways. But I don't think he's saying like, again, like George Bush is right. Like, I don't think he's saying that at all.
The reason why I really turned the corner on that, because I was with you when this movie came out, where I was just like, there's a difference between saying something and like
Endorsing it.
endorsing it. But Dunkirk, when that comes out, and we talk about that in a couple of weeks, we have to talk about it's furthering that, and it feels patriotic, right?
That
and
is the most. I think that's like the most vile in terms of like political messaging, and we'll get into that. But like, I do think that there's a little bit of questioning here in kind of like a philosophical Socratic way. Now, do you guys remember when I brought up when we watched Following there were a couple books in his apartment, and one of them was Plato's The Republic. So Plato's The Republic created this idea, or at least like wrote it down for the first time, of the noble lie. So the noble lie comes from Plato's Republic, and the idea of this is Socrates was talking to some guy about, I don't know all the details, but basically they had the idea of, if you create a myth about a place and everybody buys into it, even though it's fake, it's for the general good of society. So so the argument is, if everybody agrees to it, whether it's fake or knowing on some level that it might be fake, like the elites kind of hand down this myth of, it's like nationalism for the purpose of bringing everybody together. It's not true, but it creates like a harmonious society, right? So that's the concept of the noble lie. And that's the idea that this movie seems to be endorsing. Now, the only one reason I'll say that the movie doesn't like endorse it, completely, is that in the very next film, it's immediately called into question and creates more and more chaos. And that's another Nolan theme that we haven't talked about in this episode, which is for every action, basically, you're creating 10 unseen actions. And that's another thing that was like, bringing it back to like the real world again. In the War on Terror, there's this constant, like thing that people kept saying to like, all the kind of warmongers at the time. It was like, if you do this, there's going to be more bad things, and they'll be like, whatever, and of course, we just pulled out of Afghanistan, like a year ago, two Batmans later, and what's going on, and how, did we, create any kind of like stable, social situation there, or did we like let our own country just rot more until we had like yokels like just a year ago yesterday or whatever, taking over our own government buildings? Like it's anyway. So I think he is taking, like another kind of conservative filmmaker that I really respect, Peter Weir. I think he's asking these questions, and I don't know that he's saying wholeheartedly kind of in either way, like this is right or this is wrong, but just I think he's a political filmmaker in the sense that he's looking at these issues.
And I think either way, whether he's right or wrong and where he stands with it, it is offering like a valid thing for like the viewer to watch and sort of not take away as a statement necessarily of like, this is truth, and just be like, we're on the side of neither the Batman nor the Joker at the end of this movie. I feel like it's just sort of like, we know that the Batman was wrong. I said the Batman was wrong. I mean, but also that like he did what he had to do, right? And that's sort of like a moral gray area that's not worth thinking about.
Yeah. Right? Well, what are you saying? Sorry, I'm just saying. I got to sidetrack because you said the Batman. I want to talk about the importance of the Batman. I do want to talk about that. I think it's important. Seriously.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can go ahead, Chris.
I know I'm kind of touching on a prior point Travis had just made about crime and how people view terrorism. That's not how the world really works. I remember talking about that point in Batman Begins, how it's one of those movies that constructs this idea of a criminal is kind of born, like there are criminals and there's like non-criminals, rather than addressing like the social root of things. And that kind of, again, I don't think that he's like making this point, but I think it takes it to a unfortunate degree when we have this iconic character who's portrayed as, just absolute evil exists in the world, ignoring the fact that people commit crimes because they need something, because their needs aren't being addressed by society because the social structure is failing them, the political structure, economic structure, whatever. And these are themes that are never really truly addressed in an old movie, nor should they be necessarily, right? But I think when we have these, like characters that are portrayed as an idea, so the Joker kind of exists on a fundamental level as not a person fully, because we don't know who he is. We've said that, there's speculation as to who he is, but that's not really important. The idea is the symbol of the Joker, which stands contrast to the symbol of Batman, not the Batman, but Batman. So when we have these ideas that, okay, he just does things because he's evil. That's purely it, kind of.
But it's also like the movie does a good job of setting that up. I mean, from the beginning, the Joker is an idea, right? Because it does introduce him the same way that Batman's introduced in movies, where it's like thugs on the street talking about it, being like, I heard he could talk to bats or whatever,
Right,
like, this one is just like
right.
This one is just
I heard he has a little bat friend named Penelope and he likes to pet and feed bugs. Where did you hear that?
Like the opening of this movie is them giving the Joker that treatment.
Yes,
being
I love that. I love that.
Thugs mythologizing him.
Yes.
And immediately we're put into the idea that we're watching, two philosophical ideas fighting against each other.
Yes, and that's why I think also Harvey Dent doesn't operate on that level to me, and that's why he doesn't work in this movie. Like he doesn't. I don't know what exactly he represents. Just law and order, like I don't know. It doesn't. That's by the end of the movie, like that just didn't work for me.
Well, I called it the soul of Gotham. Like that's what they're trying to fight over with the soul of Harvey Dent. Like they're trying to say, like, in the same way that the fairy thing is doing, right? They're both, the fairy segment of the movie is saying, like, I think that the people are going to turn on each other.
It should have been a trolley. So it's like the trolley problem.
Exactly.
It's like the fairy problem. I love that. And I love that he again, like kind of made this like stupid, like, philosophical kind of conundrum but he does a real thing. I love that in the movie. And I don't think, I think that works actually. And I think that Harvey Dent in a way doesn't work.
Well, I'm okay with
I like
that.
individual scenes with him.
Yeah, like I said, if that's the finale of the movie, then that's fine with me. But just as like another stepping stone on the way to like proving a point that you don't prove in that moment, it just feels a little excessive to me.
I feel you. I'm sorry, you're gonna say something, Travis?
You were gonna say something really about Batman.
Oh yeah. So all I wanted to say about that is I like in the first movie when he shows up, he's so terrifying to people and he's like this crazy, like half man, half bat. You call him the Batman because this is a world where superheroes don't exist. There's not like Superman and Wonder Woman. You call him the Batman like you call him the Wolfman. That's all I have to say. That's where the comes from. I feel like people get confused about like why is he the Batman? It's like the Wolfman. It's like the Bat guy. You know what I mean? Like the Bat creature. So I think that totally works, and I think it makes sense that they call him that in this movie. And it doesn't make sense that they call it the Batman in the Robert Pattinson one because he's always like just a street thug, So that's a stupid reason to use it. But anyway, the end. I hate that movie, and that's what. Yeah, I mean that's what I think. Like all Nolan movies, like we talked about with Batman Begins, when it's just happening on a purely philosophical level, when it's kind of happening at a mythic level. Christopher Nolan's films are really, really powerful. When he starts, when you try to bring in any kind of element of social reality, it kind of becomes so. He's not as good at kind of towing that line of here is like a version of social reality that stands in for this other concept. I think it's just his gangsters are too cartoonish. Yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. I think like the closer it gets to kind of reality, even though it feels very real, like the physical world of the film, the closer it gets to kind of like representing a social reality, the kind of flimsier it becomes and the kind of less powerful it becomes.
I can see that.
Fair enough.
Still a really good movie. And I love all his movies so far. I mean, I think they're all great. And I really just wanted to bring it back to one of the things I said last time. about how wherever Bruce Wayne goes, he like befriends an old man, and he has like this great chemistry with like Morgan Freeman, especially in this movie when he and Morgan Freeman are in China taking pictures, when he and Alfred are in the Batcave, like with their little repartee about I'm going to tell him it was your idea. Like he's got such charm and charisma with those guys, and then when he's with his girlfriend, he's like, please be my girlfriend. Like,
no, you're right.
It's very funny, and Christian Bale does such a good job at it. I love when he throws his like champagne off the side of the building. As somebody who doesn't drink,
Gary
I was like,
Oldman
yeah, that's not like me.
Movie.
Oh, he's good.
Gary Oldman is amazing in this movie, and he is another guy who can fucking ham it up when he wants to, and he knows when to lay back. Like,
yeah, he
really just is minimal in this movie, and it works so well. And his story is also another like, how far are you willing to go sort of thing. Like,
yeah,
he's really pushing that in this movie, and it's such a constant in Nolan movies.
And that kind of works with him because it's like, oh, I have to work with these cops that are questionable, but whatever, and that does work out in the story again, like, you know, in a technical way. Can I bring? I'm sorry, I'm going back to a previous thing, but I wish I'd mentioned it before, but. The story about the guy who was stealing the jewels and just like putting him in the river. That's such a like silly kind of like story that like isn't real, and it's a little bit patronizing, especially when you consider when he's like, oh, I was like a British guy in some third world country acting as like probably colonial police, basically is what it sounds like. And then he's like, how'd you catch him? And he's like, oh, it was so sad, we had to burn down the whole forest. And it's like, dude, what are you doing in like Cambodia or wherever the hell you say you are, burning down the forest, Burma, Burma, like just destroying Myanmar, destroying forests and stuff. So again, this is like, is this Nolan commenting on that? Is this Nolan kind of like from, you know, the imperial center of Britain and America, you know, just being oblivious? I don't know. I kind of think it's the former, or, you know, but it is like interesting that keeps, you know,
I don't know.
Conservative worldview keeps kind of.
You know, I'm not sure about that, but can I touch on a point I made earlier about how I thought this was one of the most Christopher Nolan movies in terms of his themes. What I meant on that was, so every movie, of course, we talk about this idea of identity, right? And there's never been a movie, I think, in which that idea, not just of identity, but idea of false identity, someone portraying themselves to be someone they're actually not. So, you know, when you think about it, like, idea of identity is who we are, we project to the world the way the world sees us and the person that we want to be, right? We want to be seen as, you know? And this movie has almost on every level a character who is portraying someone that they're not, or trying to be someone in a way. Even Jim Gordon fakes his own death. He's pretending to be dead, right? And he comes back, you know, almost every character is operating on that level in some fashion. It's like he takes that idea and takes it to the nth degree, right? When Batman Begins, it's more the idea of Batman. It's like really revolving around him and Bruce Wayne as this character, this idea, this notion, and him grappling with that. And Ra's al Ghul being like the sort of dark side of Bruce Wayne, right? But in this movie, almost every character has this element of false identity. Like, who are we really? Who are you supposed to be? Who are you trying to be? And who does the world kind of see you as? You know? Yeah, you know, or even like the fake Harvey Dent like thing. I keep coming back to this too, but Harvey Dent is faking it. Like in the beginning, he's really like trying to give this image, but he's really flawed, I think, and it's not conveyed. Again, I think, like to Travis's point, particularly well. And then that shift happens, and we're like,
yeah, I wish we did see that more at the beginning, and I think that's all I would have needed. Just like, you know, because he has the scene where he interrogates the guy and he goes a little crazy. That seemed like the put on to me. It didn't seem like, oh, he's crazy. It seemed like he was putting on an act to scare a guy. And that I didn't really care about that. It didn't seem like that was a hard decision for him to make. It didn't seem, but yeah, I think you're right. I think, or I should say, what you're seeing in the movie, Chris, is better than what I saw in the movie. And like,
maybe I was looking for it too much and trying to make the movie.
No, because I did too.
That makes sense, but that is like Ian says, that's a fix.
Yeah, you have to watch it sort of through the third storyline in this movie. If you want to see that storyline, you know, you have to be watching the Harvey Dent movie, which the movie is not the Harvey Dent movie until the last 20 minutes, you know. But if you are watching it from the beginning on your fucking 10th watch, then you're like, you know, I mean, he does. This is 9 months after Batman Begins in the story of the movie, and he's this sort of hotshot. That's what they say, and he's this hotshot DA, like new DA that has
The nude DA.
He's the new DA that has, I mean, taken over the city, and like everybody that knew him before talks about him like, oh, he was the guy from IA that you couldn't trust because he was fighting his way to the top, right? Like that's sort of what they're. So they do lay the pebbles of groundwork there for you, but like you said, you know, it's not exactly his most. It's mathematically there, like you said, but it's not his most compelling.
How about demonstrated?
Yes.
Yeah, you don't
Yes.
see the transformation in front of you. You just hear about the transformation in words.
Yes, exactly.
I'm trying to think if there's any other notes. I did love that he continues his bringing back great 80s actors in small roles, you know,
Yes,
like he did with Rutger Hauer and
100%.
the last one, and in this one he's got Eric Roberts and Anthony Michael Hall both showing up.
Better used than Rutger Hauer too.
Yeah, I loved especially Eric Roberts in this movie. It was great.
Yeah.
I wanted him to like say, like in have you guys seen Pope of Greenwich Village?
No.
Oh, never mind. I wanted to say it then. There's a scene where he loses his thumbs and he goes, "My thumbs." I wanted him to say that about like his heels in this when he gets thrown off in the building.
That would have been really good. A good throwback. Yeah. If Christopher Nolan was Quentin Tarantino, maybe we would have gotten that. It is like a Quentin Tarantino-esque impulse, right, to bring those actors back, but in kind of more understated ways, I guess. Yeah. He does the same thing with the guy from not Hot Shots, Major League in the next one, in Inception, right? I forget his name.
I have to rewatch it.
Some leathery, handsome guy. I can't remember.
Is it Corbin Burnson?
Maybe.
I haven't seen Inception since the theater stuff.
Are you serious?
What?
Oh man, that might be one of my most rewatched Nolans.
Totally. Same here.
Should we rate it? Are we there?
I have one more random thing to say, and if this is like irrelevant, just edit it out.
Okay.
But there's a comic book where there was this comic series that happened in the late 90s when I was like a teenager. Like, it was Batman Black and White, and it was all, they brought in like some like, you know, heavy hitter comic book writers and artists to do these kind of like really great kind of quintessential Batman stories, or ones where they kind of like could take a big leap and do like kind of very meta stories. And one of the stories was from Alfred's perspective, and he writes Bruce Wayne a letter and puts it on like a tray, like with his meal or something at the end of the night for Batman to come home and get it. And I think it's like a resignation or something like that. But then at the end, he burns the letter or something. And I think the writer said something like he tried to do it in another story, and then the editor was like, Alfred would never like burn a letter that Batman was supposed to get, like, or something like that. Maybe the letter wasn't from Alfred. I can't remember all the details. I really should have reread it before this podcast. But okay. The point is the main editorial thing from this Batman story is that Alfred would never like hide a truth from Bruce Wayne, and that like goes against like, anyway, it was really cool to me that was like an element of the story where he's going to give him this letter, and then he's like, he's at a pretty low point. Even though I'm going to needle him right after his girlfriend dies, I'm not going to make him read this letter. It's like too harsh. And, but
it's also more of lying, right? It's more of the same
noble
thing
lie.
Of like
it's the noble lie.
Yeah, of just like, and you know, I mean, in this case, good call.
Like, yeah, I mean, maybe he could have not burned it, but like put it aside for a couple days. You know, I don't think burning it maybe is the right answer. You know, the last thing I'll say too is, I guess part of the point of that is, you know, I really love, like you said, Chris, how much this is like a Christopher Nolan movie, and it's like a Batman movie, but it really is a Christopher Nolan movie. Some people have referred to these films because of their kind of realism, you know, or like the fact that they're kind of grounded in a physical reality, as gritty reboots, like a gritty Batman. And that always makes me bristle, because these are some of the smoothest looking movies around, like in that era, in any era. They're extremely sleek and they're extremely pretty. And this movie, even compared to Batman Begins, which had like these kind of mahogany boardrooms and kind of like weird, like Hong Kong dirty, like slums, this one is just extremely modern and extremely clean. And it's really beautiful. And I love the design of the film.
Totally. And to that gritty
blue
point,
light.
the violence that people tend to associate with a gritty movie is actually not on screen much. Like the pencil disappearing, there's no blood. You don't see it like go anywhere. Like when he pulls out the gun on the guy, like, hey, you can't park here, and he's kind of, it's really quick. The guy getting electrocuted, it just cuts immediately right after that. You don't really. There is a violence in the movie, but it's not like it's like this blood drenched, like, gritty.
It is crazy that this is PG-13. It is crazy. Like this is this should not be PG-13. Like they edited the blood out in a very like precise way to like keep that rating. It's a little devious and it's a little messed up, but yeah.
I love the pencil scene though. That is such a great moment in fucking movies. It's great.
It's funny. Yeah,
I love that. It's gone. Like the way he delivers every line. It's not like if you're reading a screenplay. I never would have read it the way he's read it. I watched a couple of different things where they actually have the screenplay over the lines of dialogue, and he delivers almost every single line in a different way than either the script was specifically worded or the way you would intuitively probably read it. Like even
totally,
I'd lose a fist, I'd leave up a battle for the soul of Gotham. To a fist fight with you is what it's written in the screenplay, but think of Gotham's soul. But he says a really great Gotham soul. He just changes a little details.
There's moments that I never really that are less iconic, I should say, that like stood out to me this time when he is really violent. Like when he does break the pool stick and gives it to Michael Jai White's guys, and he's just like, fight for the one position on my team or whatever. It's like that's just
gross, dude. Yeah, that's messed up. I don't like that.
And like it really made me sick to my stomach in a weird way. Like, this time. And that's good. Like that was good.
Extremely messed up.
So good.
I feel like I had one more thing to say. Yeah, let's just rate it.
I'm just gonna rate it. I'm gonna say this movie is just not only going to be hard to top, but it's one of my favorite movies. I mean, I fucking really love it. I think that Heath Ledger's performance, I can't say it enough on this podcast because we aren't going to get to talk about him again, sadly. And he's so incredible in this movie. I mean, and everybody is so good in this movie. So that's my number one, Dark Knight. Then Batman Begins, then Memento, The Prestige, Insomnia, and following. I'm still debating Insomnia and Prestige where that's going to land at the end, but
right. For me, we have a new number one, and this is really close to Memento for me. It really is, but for very different reasons. This is longer than Memento, and I just love the vibe I feel from. I hate the word vibe a lot, but Memento feels a certain way. But The Dark Knight is a new number one, followed very closely by Memento. I still love The Prestige. I think it's great. I also really love Insomnia. Again, I think it's great. So that's number 4. Then Batman Begins is down there for me, especially being held up to this one. I know I'm getting scowls right now. It's okay. I own it. I just how I feel. Fight me. And then number 6, of course, is Follow. Still a good movie. Don't get me wrong. Come on, anyway.
Was that the math? Was that the math?
Yeah, exactly.
I remembered what I was going to say, and it's stupid because I already said it in the last episode, but basically it's just like he was, you really felt in the last couple movies with the running over the log sequence in Insomnia, with like a lot of the fight scenes in Batman Begins, and definitely a lot of the dialogue in Batman Begins, this kind of like growing pains towards like a bigger, more visceral cinema with like these kind of like almost operatic kind of like dialogue. And I really feel like they nailed it so hard with this movie. Like all the lines are so like iconic, and like they're not realistic. They're not how real people talk, but they work so well for the most part. And yeah, it's a great movie. I don't know if I like it as much as Memento. And honestly, the visuals from Batman Begins stick with me stronger. Like I still kind of react to that movie more strongly than this one for the most part, even though this is like, I think, a better made movie, like in almost every respect. But I can't really, even though they're very different films, I can't think of the Batman movies like individually, except that like when he's in this Batman mode, he's working like in a specific way that I love so much. So I'm gonna cheat and tie Batman Begins and Dark Knight, even though if I had to separate them, Dark Knight might be my number 3, but it's Batman Begins, Dark Knight number 1, Memento number 2, Prestige number 3, Following number 4, and Insomnia number 5, or reorder them if you need to make the numbers work better, but you get the idea.
Wait. Oh yeah.
And I can't wait for my real number 1 next week. Insomnia.
Yes.
Inception.
Yes.
Come on.
Inception, whatever. But, yeah, you know what I mean. I always think that's funny when like one filmmaker, all their movies are like alphabetically under the same letter. Totally. I feel like that happens with like Wes Anderson's movies, weirdly, are all.
Oh, I had one more note. Can I say about this movie? Because
no, that's okay. We'll see you next week, everybody.
No, I just want to say, I guess I can save it for our final episode because I don't know if this is going to end up being my number 1. But if it is, it'll be ironic that all 3 of my number 1s from our 3 seasons are brothers writing together.
Wow.
Right? Because E2 Mama, this one, and Coen Brothers were all like, that's pretty crazy.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. We're like, we are like delving into like a cinema of brothers. Like, what is the deal with that?
What's the deal with brothers?
Brother's gonna work it out. We'll work it out next week. I had to
do a terrible Seinfeld since nobody did our terrible.
I thought you were doing the mask again. Or whatever.
Okay. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.
See you later, film friends. Till we meet again.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Auteur Detour. We'll see you again next week.